Greetings, and welcome all to episode number 6 of the Creative Outlet Podcast, otherwise known as the COP. Today's date is Saturday, September 5th, 2020. Fine fall day where we are getting back into some normal everyday routines, including for me, I'm getting back into schoolwork. So, full disclosure for the audience, hopefully we don't have a situation like episode 4 again, where this takes forever to come out, but we'll just have to see what happens here. I'm going to try to get it going pretty soon, or get the editing done on this pretty soon here. As you can imagine, if you watched it and realize what I'm wearing, I am recording this immediately after recording the intro to the Creative Outlet Bonus Part 1, which you should, of course, check out. Anyway, so we're in episode 6, and as always, one of the ways that I like to start my intros is reflecting on some of the topics from the prior episode, which, numerically, as you can imagine, is episode number 5. So let's talk about some of the things that happened. Let's talk about a certain word, right? Right? Okay, so when I was listening to the edit of episode 5, there was a certain pattern that I noticed quite a bit that I'm hoping I correct in this episode. I cannot say for sure that it will certainly not happen, but I swear to great good googly moogly, every sentence I said seemed to end with comma, right, question mark, and, you know, I wish I knew what happened there, to be honest. That was kind of weird. It was definitely a bit strange, because I feel like that isn't something that I do super often, but I can't pretend like that is not a part of my normal speech and vernacular and the like. But suffice to say, we probably will not be having that happen so much, because even I can say from my own editing, that was annoying to listen to over and over and over. And it makes me sound as if I'm not very confident in my claims, which is very bad for when you're trying to make arguments and claims. That's your debate tip of the day. Talking about other things that happened in that episode. So you may remember at the very start of it, we talked about good old COVID-19, which of course is still going on in this great year of 2020. And I gave some best practices that we should be doing at the time. But one thing that I noted in the text that I feel is very good for me to also say, just so it's out there, is though I do stand by the best practices that I gave in that introduction, I just once more want to point out, I am not a doctor. I cannot, necessarily give you medical advice because I simply do not have that expertise. So, of course, you should always make sure to consult your doctor, be it just a simple family practice or any sort of specialists who are important to you that can give you, some recommendations on what you should do with your health. But regardless, I do stand by those best practices outlined in there regardless. I want to talk a little bit more from last time on the status of college, because one of the topics in that episode was should we as students be returning. So of course I have many updates here on the University of Wisconsin, because like I said, that's my home state's main college system, and that's primarily what I wanted to focus on, because again, it's important to me. But here I have a little bit about the University of North Carolina to start with, specifically the Chapel Hill campus. I found that basically it was open and closed. Shocker. So as of August 25th, which is a little bit Obviously, this is a bit of older news. There were 11 clusters of cases of COVID-19 on campus between on campus housing and off campus housing. So I hate to say it, but that's a really big piece of evidence just reaffirming my worry about all of these students returning to college. Because that was about, if I remember correctly, there were 4 already within the first week. 4 of these clusters, not 4 cases, 4 clusters of cases between on campus and off campus housing. And already seeing that jump up not too much later to 11 clusters of cases is pretty freaky. So I really hope that everything goes well for the students at the University of North Carolina. If they're sick, I hope they get better. Sounds like my understanding was basically after that first week, the campus decided, well, guess we're going to have to go back all online. Again, I hope students' mental health in that situation is very sufficient, that they're making sure to take care of themselves, that professors aren't being too terribly hard on students right now. And most importantly, that ultimately, they aren't the ones being blamed here. We're going to talk about that a little itty bit here when we talk about the UW system, but I really don't want the students to be blamed. I mean, as much as obviously those who were being irresponsible should have had the agency to not do the things that they weren't supposed to do, ultimately the people at the top could have made sure to prevent these things that happened in the first place. So when it comes to the UW system, I have a couple of updates, and these are, again, primarily coming from the flagship University of Wisconsin-Madison campus. These are articles from outlets in the area. So there's one article here from Channel 3000 that I want to talking about where UW doctors say the ball is in students, like in the students' court, to act responsibly, because, as you can imagine, people between the ages of 18 and 24 that don't have a completely developed prefrontal cortex are not always the best at making rational decisions. And I just want to point out, these doctors have their premise totally backwards. Now, sure, I accept the fact that obviously, as employees of a campus, they're not going to be like, yeah, our leaders kind of made like the stupidest decision possible. I get that, right? They have to defend their employer ultimately. But saying that the ball is in the student's court is fundamentally wrong. Why? Because those people at the top could have said, no, we're going to take that opportunity they could have away from them in the first place. They're the ones who really have the power. Because again, I don't remember if I said this in the last episode, but if I did, it's worth reiterating. The choice to go back to campus was a false choice. If you had or have an in-person class on campus, you had to go. Short of being able to figure out a way to switch it out or just get rid of it, or, of course, if you had multiple in-person classes, there was no way you were not going to be on campus. That wasn't really your choice in the end, because you have to be there for those classes, especially if it's one that you have to have because it's a general education requirement, or it is specifically for your degree and you need it, or you won't be able to get your degree. You just have to be there, and that's unfortunate. But, you were put in that place not entirely of your own volition. It's because these people wanted to send you there. Similarly, the UW system president, who is former Wisconsin Governor Tommy Thompson, who's apparently the governor during the George W. Bush years, noted that he has a threshold in mind for, quote, when to shut down campuses. Not if he has to shut down campuses, but when campuses need to shut down. Why am I putting so much emphasis on that word? Because it shows that this individual who has the most power in this situation, because he's the president of every campus, from the little itty bitty community colleges all the way up to this flagship campus in the capital of the state, knows that the campuses will close. He knows that it's going to happen. He has a plan for, well, here's how bad it needs to get before I'm going to say it has to happen. So why bother sending the student back in the first place, Tommy? Can you give me a good reason? Similarly, recently there were some people in power in the city council, I believe. Let me just make sure I have the article here. It's some Madison elected officials, and I'm pretty confident it's the city council, but I just, I have to, it's members of the Dane County Board, as well as half of the Madison City Council, and even some of the school board members as well, all spoke up. And this is on, when did this article from Madison.com for the Wisconsin State Journal come out? August 25th as well. We're basically telling the campus, hey, you should not be sending students back. You have a weak enforcement plan, which is also something that I talked about in that segment. And there's inevitably going to be an outbreak on campus that is going to potentially lead to more spread of COVID-19 in our city, which we represent, and we don't want that to happen. And look, I'm glad that these elected officials were speaking up about this, but I have one question. Where on earth were you back in May? Because this is an issue that I, as a student, was thinking about back in May. I'm sure there were thousands of other students also thinking about this same issue back in May. At the very least, they were thinking about it in June or July when it's like, oh man, it's almost school time. Right? I'm sorry if I'm like peaking the audio here, but as you can imagine, that's pretty upsetting to me, where it's like, well, I'm glad you were thinking about this, but you should have thought about this earlier. Because I'm sorry, but this is the 25th? It was 8 days until the semester started, because in the state of Wisconsin, school's not allowed to start until September 1st at the earliest, legally, by state law. Sometimes they push it, like if, the 1st of September was like a Friday or a Thursday, and then students immediately have Labor Day off because it's a federal holiday. They'll just push it to the first day of the week after Labor Day. But I digress from that point. The point is, this should have been an issue way, way before August 25th. And sure, maybe that's when the article just happened to come out and they were talking about it a little bit earlier. But still, the bigger picture point is that this should have been done at the very least a month before. Now, one point that's also made in this article that I think is very important, which is that the main reason that the university pointed to for continuing in-person instruction, even if it is for like, it's about 40% of classes, is because there is, quote, overwhelming feedback from students on their preference for in-person instruction as part of the reason for, as like their main motivator to open campus. But here's the issue with that claim that they're making. There was no campus-wide survey of students. How on earth can you make the claim that, quote, there is overwhelming feedback from students preferring in-person instruction in the fall when there was no student body survey? Either you're just lying, or you're kind of just basing this information on like murmurings around the community of like, well, I heard like in this class a bunch of students are like, gosh golly gee, I wish we could make sure we have in-person instruction in the fall. That is still not the same as a student body survey. I also want to point out that students, as it says here in this article, were forced to complete basically a training exercise on COVID-19 best practices, and many of the ones that I talked about were included in this. Is my understanding. The givens: social distance, wear a mask, tell people if you don't want to gather, hey, I don't think I want to go to that thing because that sounds unsafe. Yeah, that sort of stuff. And they have to, at the end of it, sign. It says in the article here, I just saw it. Where is it? The Badger Pledge, which basically says, hey, I'm going to make sure to always wear a mask and socially distance. And if, I'm like a student in power, like an RA or a student employee, I'm going to make sure that everybody's wearing a mask. Let me remind you from last time that I mentioned. This is a place that in housing takes pride in the fact that only 25% of all first-year students in housing drink illegally. Okay? You really, honest to goodness, think that this pledge is gonna stop kids from gathering? And to put the cherry on top, this is a bit of information that came out, it was either today or yesterday. As of the first week of classes on campus at this flagship campus, 9 of the approximately 60 fraternities and sororities have already had to be quarantined. So that's it's give or take 1/6, which is about, let's see. What is 1/6? I should just know this off the top of my head. I know 1/8 is like 0.12%. This is 17% of fraternities and sororities already quarantined on campus. That is insane. In 1 week. And granted, again, keep in mind, let's just be fair. Let's say that these kids all moved in August 30th, about exactly a week ago. Maybe even some of them were earlier, around like August 27th, 28th, right? We've been there a little more than a week. And 17% of fraternities and sororities already need to be quarantined. I don't want to critique this campus and these people because I hate them or because they're wrong or, I'm not patriotic for my state or whatever, but we gotta be real here. 17% of fraternities and sororities in a week? Claiming that there's overwhelming desire to have in-person classes when no student body survey was conducted? Looking even like at UNC, Chapel Hill, there were 11 clusters of COVID-19 cases on campus. There is no way that any semester, almost anywhere, is going to be successful, at least in places with dormitory housing. So, I hate to start on this somewhat dour note in the introduction here, but like I said, we have to be realistic. We have to make sure that people are safe. So, I hope I do not, in every episode, have to continue giving updates on this. I probably will, because I figure this is a good running topic to have, since there's going to be constant updates just coming out, even just in the basic news cycle. I'm just sad about the whole situation, because I and many others would like to get back to campus and get studying and having in-person classes, because I can tell you from experience, and I can tell you from the fact that I did not have episode 4 edited until basically the middle of June, that online asynchronous classes are miserable. So, with that all stated, we're going to be having 4 topics as usual in this podcast. And today's topics are going to be as follows. We're going to be talking about was/is there a Nintendo Direct drought? We're going to be giving a review to one game that I am quite a fan of. Clubhouse Games 51 Worldwide Classics, released in June. I thought it would be good to give a sort of summer nostalgia-y topic. And while it could be super easy to do, like, did you do things on the beach? I really didn't. I was never really a kid that went to the beach super duper often. But something that I've done a handful of times in my life was go to some smaller amusement parks. There's going to be an amusement park experiences segment, and one thing that I really enjoyed talking about in the intro last time that I'm somewhat expanding a little bit more into a bigger topic here is talking about more retail snafus. So those are going to be our topics today. Let's get ready to hit the ground running on them.